Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and as usual, I'm here to introduce you to something new to you, usually something to watch, usually television, and hopefully adding some context along the way. In today's episode, Darren and I will be discussing the most recent episode of The Day of the Jackal, the Sky/Peacock television production. This will be publishing probably on Tuesday, so just a warning for anybody in the US, if you're watching this on Peacock, the premieres for this particular episode is Thursday, so if it's not Thursday yet, you may want to hold off. I recommend you do not spoil yourself before watching this episode. A very eventful episode that I nonetheless had a lot of issues with, and I'll be discussing that in much more detail with Darren coming up. Before that, I did want to have a few recommendations and a little commentary on the surprising amount of spy series we're seeing and also conspiracy-themed series. So some thoughts on that trend. So no spoilers yet. First of all, Darren and I actually discussed this season of television, Black Doves, in a little bit of detail within the conversation, but I did want to spend just a few more minutes getting into it. This is currently the #1 series on Netflix, also a spy series, starring Keira Knightley, Ben Whishaw, and Sarah Lancashire, and created by Joe Barton. Joe Barton also created The Lazarus Project, a series that I've recommended here on the podcast before, which is also a conspiracy series, but featuring a science fiction element to it where time travel is possible. The star of that series, Papa Eswedu, actually shows up in a bit role here in Black Doves. And that series also features a very complex character, not quite a good guy or a bad guy, played by Tom Burke, who is just so excellent in the Furiosa movie this year. So I didn't really get into the second season of The Lazarus Project, but just to call it out that if you're into science fiction, you like those time travel, conspiracy theory type series or movies, it's available on TNT to stream, and I believe it's available on the iPlayer for the BBC overseas. And if you have seen that series, or Jiri Haji, another series that he created a few years back, you'll know that he has quite a blend of tones where the comedic, the violent, the heartfelt will often blend together within just a few scenes, and it doesn't always work for me. But in Black Doves, this Christmas set spy thriller, it mostly does. The first 3 episodes of this season of television, and it has been renewed for a second season, so I guess internally Netflix knows they have a hit on their hands. And I think everybody's been trying to find a Slow Horses of their own. Slow Horses is definitely not Apple TV's biggest hit show, but the fact that they can churn these out year after year, and every year the show gets more popular, it now is getting Emmy nominations. I think everybody's looking for this type of project. And of course, The Agency, the biggest Showtime premiere in their history, based on a French series that ran for 5 years, has gotten a green light for season 2. Something, of course, we are covering here on the podcast. Do check out our most recent episode where we discuss episode 3 of that series, with a great interrogation scene featuring Michael Fassbender. And of course, The Day of the Jackal, which we'll be discussing here, renewed for a second season, and now Black Doves as well. In the series itself, we have Keira Knightley playing an operative who began a relationship with one of her contacts and eventually married him. Not a spoiler, this is the setup of the series itself. He is in line to become prime minister. She is becoming more and more of a public figure and simultaneously still indebted to this spy organization. She has a close relationship with the Ben Whishaw character, and due to something that happened in his past, he has run away from the UK and is now back to help her out. But given the outcome of one of his previous missions, he has a target on his back as well. And Sarah Lancashire from the excellent Happy Valley, which I've recommended here on a podcast multiple times, plays the head of this covert operative team, which is not really government agency. It is actually an independent contractor. They apparently do proactive espionage so that they have information to sell to the highest bidder. And speaking of a blend of tones, I describe this as Love Actually meets The Bourne Identity. And that's only half a joke, because you have a series, like many of Joe Barton's previous work, that is primarily motivated by the interpersonal dynamics between these characters, and the personal becomes foundational to all of the action we actually end up seeing. All of these characters carry these sins of the past while trying to lead parallel lives, something that, by the way, we see again in the Day of the Jackal series. But this really worked for me, and I think to a large extent because some of what I feel is lacking in some of these spy series, an understanding of the toll, the emotional toll of being this type of person, and how the person you were at one point dictates you being in the current circumstance. But of course you change, your priorities change, but you are still trapped in the circumstances that led to this point. And it dwells on this in a way that most spy series kind of just leave as subtext or as a question mark, just as a mystery to these spies' backstories. Here we lean heavily into those themes. So in a way, it is a nice complement to what I've been watching. And I think you'll like it too. And it's very popular, and I do recommend it. Darren had more reservations than I did, but he also thought the first few episodes were truly excellent. And I totally agree with that. Very much looking forward to revisiting these characters. But this did, in general, make me think about where we're at in this moment where there are so many spy series, obviously with these 3 shows, but of course we just wrapped up a season of Slow Horses just a couple of months ago. The Diplomat, which just wrapped up its 2nd season recently on Netflix, is more of a Aaron Sorkin political drama, but definitely has elements of conspiracy and espionage. The Night Agent, also on Netflix, is back for a 2nd season in January. There's another conspiracy series also coming to Netflix in February, starring Robert De Niro. Leo Woodall, coming off the success of season 2 of The White Lotus, and last year's very popular One Day series on Netflix, has an Amazon Prime series coming in January, which we will probably cover to some extent here on the podcast, called Prime Target, where he's a mathematician who has made some kind of discovery about the patterns within prime numbers, which makes it very easy to crack all of the advanced encryption currently, which of course leads to him being targeted by nefarious powers that be. And as I've mentioned previously, we also have 2 more seasons of The Night Manager. Excellent. Season 1 of that available on Amazon Prime currently. So do catch up on that, which is all the way back in 2016 and now coming back for 2 more series. And that is also premiering later this year. And I bring all that up because there is obviously something in the water between these espionage shows and generally conspiracy theory shows. And I'll throw into this mix also The Madness, a series that is very popular on Netflix right now. Netflix seems to have a lot of these, by the way, now that I'm calling them all out. A series that didn't really quite work for me, but does feature a very strong performance by Coleman Domingo. So I just think it speaks to the moment we're in right now where there is truly a mistrust in the systems of power, which probably extends to some of the popular science fiction now, whether it be Silo, whether it be even Severance. We live in the world where, whether it is these large corporations, incredibly wealthy individuals, the political parties that, to a large extent, are funded by those individuals and organizations, I think there's a real sense of a loss of control. And this actually exists on both sides of the aisle. I don't think this is a left or right political ideology. I think it actually encompasses both sides of the political spectrum. So I find it interesting and yet worrying because, to some extent, there is probably a true cynicism culturally all over the world that is leading to this type of popular entertainment. So I do worry about that. But then I think back on the heyday of great conspiracy thrillers that spanned the 70s, another period of time between the Vietnam War and the Kennedy assassination and all the other high-profile assassinations of the late 60s and early 70s, where there was a great deal of cynicism. And you saw it in those films of the 70s. And hey, it led to some really, truly classic 70s cinema, some of my absolute favorite films of all times. And hey, we all made it through then. So hopefully we get all that good art without us all getting a little too cynical in our personal political beliefs. A less cynical recommendation I have for all of you is also discussed here briefly with Darren, a film that had been recommended to me by one of our listeners in the UK, a film called Kneecap, which I mentioned to you for a few reasons. First of all, it's on Netflix. I didn't realize it was on Netflix, and all of a sudden it was just there in my recommendations, and I played it and I loved it. Second of all, it features a small but very powerful performance by Michael Fassbender, of course, currently being watched here on The Agency. And lastly, just yesterday, as I'm recording this, it won a bunch of British Independent Movie Awards. And this is a very entertaining, definitely feels like similar films, this rags to riches story of this Irish, improbably an Irish rap band that rap in Gaelic. And parts of this feel like Train Spotting, parts of this feel like Sing Street. And if you're familiar with this type of rags to riches, The Commitment's another good corollary, although maybe a little more raunchy than that one. So it follows all the beats you would expect, although executes on them very nicely. I really enjoyed the music. And most interesting of all was the fact that these are the actual performers playing themselves in the movie. And all of them, at least 2 of them actually, are pretty solid performers. I would have assumed that they were actors and not thought that they were just musical performers up until this point. And there's at least one true knockout scene between Michael Fassbender and his the actress playing his wife here. So track that down. Also, one last thing it connects to is, of course, this battle for Northern Ireland's cultural identity, which ties directly with Say Nothing, another series that premiered recently on Hulu. Excellent adaptation of that nonfiction book. Okay, so that's a roundup. Before we jump over to the conversation with Darren, here's a little voice memo that I received from Wallace in the UK, which was the very source of the Kneecap recommendation. And thanks for your feedback, Wallace. And as a reminder to everybody, please do email me, send me any recommendations you want to shout out for a year-end episode, episodes of the podcast you may have liked, or just shows that you liked that maybe we did cover, maybe we did not cover here on the show, movies. My conversations with Darren, and you'll hear here with Wallace as well, led me to finally catch up on Mr. Inbetween, a really interesting series that I really enjoyed very much. Just finished up season 3 of that recently, available on Hulu here in the United States. So yeah, I love your feedback. Send an email, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com, or record a little voice memo right on your phone and attach it to said email, and I'll include it here in the episode. So here's Wallace.
Hi, Victor. It's Wallace here. I just finished episode 9 of The Day of the Jackal, and I loved it. It was fantastic. I am loving the spy stuff that's out at the moment. I watched The Agency, then listened to your podcast as well. Thoroughly enjoyed The Agency. Really looking forward to the rest of that. And I'm also glad to hear that Darren steered you towards Mr. Inbetween. I watched that when it came out. Absolutely fantastic. I love it. I love season 2 especially. It really expanded on season 1. And you have to remember that socks are important. Anyway, I just thought I'd send you a voice note. That's it. I hope you are well and looking forward to your continued excellence. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.
We'll be right back after a short break. All right, Darren. So I have a whole bunch of questions for you about the episode, but even before we jump into the episode, a couple of announcements. The Agency, which we're talking about here on the podcast, and curious to see if you've seen the most recent episode, but announced after just 1 week, this was the biggest premiere ever for Showtime of any shows they've ever had. So, of course, instant renewal after just the first week. And of course, I think that was always their intention. That French series that it's based on ran for 5 years.
I am up to date with that. I just watched episode 3 yesterday, I think. And yeah, it's very good, isn't it?
That was the scene of, really seeing Fassbender at his best there in the interrogation room. I thought that was an incredible scene.
Amazing. Brilliant. Everyone on that show is great. I'm not a massive Richard Gere fan, but he just does such good work all the time. He's so consistent. But yeah, everyone there is amazing.
I mean, you have such an incredible cast, right? Working together. You see like Jeffrey Wright, another one of my favorite actors also in there. So just a, stacked cast. Even the small parts like the Dr. Blake, I forget her name, but the psychoanalyst who's there with them, who I've known for 30 years ago when she was a regular on Frasier and still, very like a great character actress. Really terrific.
Right, that's where I know her from. She is familiar. She's really good too.
She's one of those people who, if you look at her IMDb, she just does guest roles on, she'll be in 2 episodes of this show, 2 episodes of that show. But as I was looking at her resume, I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that. But there's something I saw where she was in a lot of the show. And I'm like, oh my God, it must be Frasier from like when I was a kid.
She's so solid. And in that interrogation scene you referenced, she can switch. And she can change and she's very fluid with what Fassbender is going with, and he's changing as well. It was just brilliant.
Yeah, I love the whole idea that he is flipping the script on her where he puts her on the defensive. I just thought that was brilliant the way he did that. So if people aren't watching that, definitely check it out. Paramount Plus. I think they still have that. I'm currently reactivated my Paramount Plus. They have a Black Friday deal for $2.99 per month for 2 months, which will cover the run of the series. So give it a shot. It's very cheap and it's a very good show. And it's definitely coming back for a second season. I know sometimes when people reach out to me via email and they'll be like, I'm not sure if I'm going to watch that show. I don't think it's coming back for another season. Well, this one is definitely coming back for another season. So speaking of coming back for a second season, Sweet Pea has been renewed for a second season. Another show that I definitely think people should watch.
Go. Good one. Yeah, well, that's good. I really enjoyed that watch too. So good to see more of that actress. She's amazing on screen.
She's super busy. It's so funny. I just saw Arcane, which wrapped up, and she does the voice of one of the leads in there. And of course, she's on Fallout, which is also coming out for season 2. And she also is on Yellow Jackets.
Mm.
So I don't know if she's going to be able to do all these shows. At least Arcane is over, but Fallout is definitely coming back. Of course, Yellow Jackets season 3 is coming back in February, so very busy.
Oh, that's good. I enjoyed Fallout. I never played the video games,
Me
but
neither.
I really got stuck into the world, and yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting most of the run.
Yeah, I reviewed it here on the podcast, and I thought that the pilot episode completely knocked me out. I just thought the visuals were
Mm,
just the seeing LA get bombed was
mm.
an incredible visual. And then I felt like they really did get cheaper as the show ran on. But I was definitely interested, and I'm very curious about this mythology. I like these characters. It didn't do a great job of managing those different tones all the time, but in general,
Mm.
it was pretty solid. I definitely want to see a second season.
And Walton Goggins is
Oh, he's
incredible.
great. Yes.
I just watch him in everything. He's so
Exactly.
good.
So good. A few things I wanted to follow up with you on, kind of piggybacking on all these things. One is as far as balancing these different tones and getting it really well. Did you sample Black Doves at all?
Oh yeah, okay. So I did, and I
Mhm.
binged it.
Oh, nice.
6 episodes really quickly. I thought the first 3 episodes were incredible. I,
Yep.
I really enjoyed it. I loved
Yep.
seeing again movie stars on a TV show,
hmm
and it was action and it was comedy as well, which I
Yep.
feel like these movie stars really could sell the comedy.
Yep.
And I was right into it. I loved everything about it. And then the last 3 episodes, it just got worse and worse for me. I just
Yes.
did not follow it. I couldn't get the
Yep.
tone that they were going
Right.
for. The assassin characters were really great, and then they were really
Yep.
comedic, and it really fell flat for me. And by the end, I didn't care.
Oh, really? Okay. I completely agree with what you said. It didn't lose me as much. I thought they kind of nailed the landing. And for me, in general, I think I overrate in my own estimation when someone does something in a way that I would not have done it, but then it works for me. So in some ways I'm like, this isn't really working for me, but then it wobbles, but then it doesn't fall over. And I kind of in my own mind, I'm like, oh, that's surprising that worked. Like, so I do tend to overrate that a little bit. Where I agree with you is I think it's probably halfway through episode 4. I think I was still on board for most of episode 4. I thought the first 3 episodes absolutely were incredible. When I recommended it to you, when I emailed you, I was like, man, this show is incredible. I was probably in episode 2 or maybe even episode 3 at that point. And I'm like, this is going to be one of the best shows of the year. And then, and then I almost like emailed you back, like, I might have overhyped it there after I've seen a little bit more of it. But it still worked for me, even though I do agree. Like, I think I was still trying to vibe with it, even though it was kind of going a little bit off track for me. But the last episode is really the weakest of all of them. But yeah, I mean, I still recommend it because I thought that, just the setup and this, once again, by the way, must be getting, I don't know how Netflix knows their internal metrics and sometimes wait a whole year to renew a show. They also announced the renewal for this instantaneously. It just came out on Thursday. So their internal metrics must be really strong. And I would be very curious to see, especially the Wishaw character. I think he was terrific. Oh,
Mm,
and you mentioned the 2 assassin girls. I think are fantastic. So
mm.
I'd like these people. It needs a stronger script. I think, like you mentioned. Yeah, I thought in general this was good.
And it was interesting seeing is it the American Embassy in London? It's
Yeah.
the same building as in
Yes.
the agency, so
Yes.
it could
Exactly.
these shows could be going on at the same time.
Oh, I read an article where they basically made a joke that they're all happening at the same time. The Slow Horses building is like across the street from this building, so it's like this could all be in one shared universe.
That's cool.
Oh, and speaking of Michael Fassbender, Kneecap, I saw it. It's on Netflix in the US. Didn't even realize it was available. Had mentioned to you, oh yeah, I've been wanting to see that. And then I was just looking at my letterboxd of just movies that people have mentioned to me in my watch list. And I'm like, what can I watch tonight? And I'm like, this is on Netflix. I'm like, I can watch it right now. So I popped it on. And what a blast the Kneecap movie was. And Fassbender has a relatively small part, but there's this one scene between him and his estranged wife, which is a complete knockout that literally bumped the whole movie up half a notch for me. And yeah, I really liked it. I think it's a pretty generic rags to riches, but I did like the whole setting. Like I have no idea about this actual band. This is a real band, and this Gaelic a rap group, which was hilarious. Actually, most of them are really good performers as well.
It's on my list. I like Fassbender when he often goes back to his home country to do films, and it's great
Yeah.
to hear him in his natural accent.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, by the way. I mean, I didn't even know this story was about a real group of people. And then I did not know that it was the actual people performing themselves because they're pretty good. They're pretty good actors. One of them doesn't speak much, but that's kind of his persona. And I have a feeling he's probably the worst actor of the 3. but the other two are all over the film. They're like primary cast members.
Is this one of these movies that people make and then it gets purchased by Netflix and then it gets a huge audience?
I don't know what the deal with it was, but I don't think it got any kind of substantial theatrical release here. And maybe Netflix, acquired it right out of one of these festivals where it got some good reviews. Because yeah, as far as I knew, I honestly did not even know it was on Netflix, and then until I just happened to find it on the letterbox when I filtered on Netflix, I'm like, oh, that one, okay, let's take a look at it. And yeah, a lot of fun.
Oh, excellent.
And the last thing I want to mention to you, I just saw this with my wife a couple of days ago, and then I was looking through when I was rating it on my letterbox. I'm looking at, well, have any of my friends seen this? And you had seen this. It's the Yacht Rock documentary.
You should see my my playlist this week.
Oh, nothing
100% Yacht Rock. I really enjoyed this documentary. I was aware of the genre and I was aware, you know, all the choruses to these songs, but I didn't
right.
know the bands. I didn't know the songs really about what it was all about. But this documentary ties it all together, ties the genre together and shows the links between the artists.
Yep.
And yeah, I thought it was a fantastic doco. And yeah, I've been exploring that music for the last week. How about yourself?
I grew up when I was very young. It was that moment in the late 70s, early 80s. It's not even bands I knew. It was just every song was this song, right? There was just a 2 or 3 year period where it was inescapable. And so it just was what I had heard when I was very young. And then when I had like a musical conscience, when I became a preteen or teenager, I started to buy my own music. I was like, I do not like that music. That's old people music from when I was like a little kid. And I just completely neglected it. As I got older and I started to realize like, oh man, these guys played with Bowie, that, Toto did all the music for Thriller and wrote
Thriller.
Human Nature. And they are all over this place. And I started to have this appreciation for it. And especially, by the way, one of the main reasons that this came around when I was in high school, I was a fan of like De La Soul. And I'm like, oh, I know that sample. That's, that's like the Doobie Brothers or no, I take that back. That sample is actually Steely Dan. Michael McDonald is the Regulators Regulate. What's his?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
What's
his Steely Dan Peg is the
Peg,
sample
yes,
for
exactly. The De La Soul. So yeah, so there was a moment in time in the 90s when a lot of the bands I liked when I got into rap music were all sampling that music. And that was another thing that kind of gave me a little appreciation for it. Although even at the time I was like, oh, they're ironically sampling it. But it was only later when you hear like Questlove like loves this music. It's not like they were stealing soul music, which was kind of the reputation it had. They really love this music. So, that gives me a lot more respect for them now. I still don't really love this music other than in a nostalgic way. Like now I appreciate it as nostalgia and it's incredible. Like Toto played on literally thousands of records. It's amazing. They're like
incredible. And one of those guys from Toto, he says all he does all day is just create new music. Some of them go somewhere. Some of them just creates for himself as an older guy. And it's just, what a life, hey? Played on Thriller.
Yeah, I know, right? Very few people can say that for sure. And all over Thriller, you think about Max Martin or something that has an industry of people, it's all Max Martin, but it's actually like all these underlings that are making beats and doing samples and writing tunes. And then they all get packaged up or, he shepherds them into songs that they get doled out to different people, but they don't like write a whole album, which is very different than what Toto did, where they're literally doing all the backing tracks for all of Thriller, basically almost every single track on there, and even writing big chunks of those songs. It really is like more like the Wrecking Crew or something back in the day, where they come in and they're like, "What do you want me to sound like? Oh, you want hard rock? I can do that. You want jazz? I can do that. You want you want to play on Pet Sounds? I can do that." And it's amazing they have that kind of versatility. So kudos for them being such great musicians.
They were so comfortable in the studio, and then so comfortable on stage at the back of the stage. And then when MTV came out, they were like, this is beyond us. We're just these dorky white guys. We don't have an image to portray on television in your home. We just do the music. The genre kind of collapsed almost or changed into something else.
Oh, there's so many artists that, it really just changed so significantly in the 80s when image became such a big part of being on MTV basically. And now how music videos are everywhere, and yet no one watch music videos anymore in any serious way because they're just watching TikToks. So the music can stand by itself in a way. You could be a total, introvert now, but not back in the day. You had to be on MTV or you didn't exist. So it really did change things significantly. I'm sure there'll be a documentary about that we could talk about at some point in the future if they haven't already made one.
Mm.
All right, let's get into this 9th episode. We're just one episode away, excitingly. Oh, and anyone out there who is listening to this in the US, this is not available yet. It's on Thursday. So bookmark here. And nothing we set up to now is not available to watch, but this part will be unavailable until Thursday. So I'm planning to publish this earlier to get some of this international audience, but you may want to pause the conversation here because we're going to spoil episode 9. And you should really watch it before you listen to the conversation.
Yes, definitely.
All right. I think I'm going to be in the minority here, just to tease to give my opinion a little bit early. I had a lot of issues with this episode, although I think parts of it were really thrilling. But yeah, let me ask you what you thought in general of the episode.
I did think it was thrilling. And to spoil it right off the bat, I am very happy and thrilled that he got his target. That satisfied me. But there was a big problem in the middle of the episode, and he has given himself away.
Yes.
And I've got a lot of trouble with that. A supposedly intelligent, anonymous killer who has really just left the big clue on the table for everyone to find him. But apart from that, I enjoyed the episode for sure.
Yeah, I have a pet peeve of mine where, and I guess it depends on it because I've definitely forgiven something. If I am just whatever emotionally hooked in, I will forgive a lot in a movie specifically. Maybe it's more so in a movie because it's such a, it's so concise in a way rather than going week to week watching a show. But I do have an issue where I start to feel like this is only written this way because like he needs to drop a clue, right? Like, and that starts to bother me where it's like, this isn't the character doing this anymore. It's the writers doing it so they can get to the next episode. That I always bump against that. So we'll get to it, but yes, that's the biggest one. The thing you mentioned, that kind of the trial run of his assassination and how that is like such a glaring clue he's leaving behind. And I have a lot of questions about that. So we start off, we're in Croatia, right? And he is trying to scope out how is he going to be able to pull this off? He obviously is thinking about approaching the island in some way, as we speculated on last week, seeing that any boat that gets even pretty far away from the island is immediately stopped by the authorities and searched. And while he's doing this reconnaissance, I guess I assume here, generously reading this, that he's not only just looking at this happening, he's trying to see, well, which boats do raise an alarm, which ones don't, so he can kind of get an idea of how close he can get. Is that how you read this whole sequence?
Yeah, I enjoyed finally seeing the boat scene that we saw every week. We see it in the opening titles, that overhead shot of the boats. We finally saw it in this episode. That was my most enjoyable bit of that scene.
And of course, it gets interrupted by I forget the character's name here, but the one who works for that conglomerate, the Charles Dance conglomerate, and she could have broken his nose here, by the way, where she's like interrupting him, taking over she's like, what are you doing? Sightseeing? And he's like, no, I have an approach. I'm trying to plan. He seems very patient with her here. And she obviously is panicked because they think that this is not going to work out, or he may not even be on target anymore.
She gets her one scene a week. One very short scene. That's it.
It really is more like it's gotten to the point where it's like 2 or 3 lines per week. Exactly. At least it was one scene earlier, but it was a long scene, right? She's on the boat with him. She's in his hotel room. Now it's just like one line dialogue and she disappears for the rest of the episode. And then we see UDC. He's still doing his daily exercises. His confidant / boyfriend possibly is worried about the situation, but he gives him some really terrible advice towards the end of the episode too, which was pretty funny. But trying to make sure that, is he confident that River's going to get turned on? I actually at this moment thought that when he's raising all these doubts, obviously you would if you were concerned, but I also started to think like, maybe he's in on it in some way. Although I was convinced otherwise by the end of the episode.
Yeah, he does say something about the board, doesn't he?
Yes.
The board won't listen to me. I think my theory that he's the real guy, it's still holding true. I don't think it really has done anything to dissuade me from that. So we'll see if that occurs. But he did show a little bit of vulnerability to his partner then.
I was thinking about your theory when I was seeing those interactions between the two of them. And I'm starting to think that he isn't, although I do agree that you could still read the scene both ways. He could be telling him that, exactly like you said, that I don't know if I can go through with this. I don't want you to put your neck on the line. And he's saying that they won't listen to me, even though maybe he is the mastermind. It's still just the fact that they're not going to buy it, basically, if you happen to die. I'm pretty convinced Judy C is legit because he seems much more he seems like more in control, right? He's literally saying like, I'm going to do this in 5 hours, right? It doesn't sound like his partner, whose name I don't remember right now, but I'm less confident in your theory, let's say. But I think you could still read. I think you could still read the scenes that way. They have made it ambiguous enough.
Yeah, we'll see. He did get again. He gets a lot of coverage in the episode,
does.
and he was extremely upset at the end.
Very upset
when
yes.
UDC met his end.
So we see Bianca, and she is looking for the Duggan character. She goes and talks to this guy who's dying of cancer, who was he the lead of this group in Afghanistan? Is that what he was?
I think he was
Captain
the
Baldwin.
Operational lead. He wouldn't go out on the missions, but he would hold.
Or else he would have been blown up.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, that was a cool scene. I quite liked Bianca being a bit of a badass.
And she doesn't get much useful information out of him, but he does mention to her that he was inseparable from this Gary character. So now she's got to see, can I track that guy down?
Where's Gary? Can we see Gary? Is he still alive? I reckon he's still alive. I reckon we're going to see him in the next episode.
I got to ask a question here. Like, we can circle back to it at the end as well. But I mean, this is a lot of ground to cover for one more episode, because I'm pretty sure they're still setting up the whole Gary thing, like you mentioned. She also has this clue, the snipe in Spain, right? Which is obviously a huge red flag. And simultaneously, we see that there are 3 or 4 boats hot in pursuit of the Jackal. So it's like, how's he going to get out of his circumstance? These are things happening like geographically, not even, she's not going to track down Gary and go to Cadiz and, get a call that they are hot in pursuit of the Jackal in Estonia. And all those things are going to happen in one episode. Seems like a really busy episode.
That's a good point. To drop that clue in this episode, they have rushed it a bit. Maybe they're rushing towards the end a bit quickly. Yeah, you're right. Maybe Gary doesn't come into it. I really wanted to see what he's up to, whether he was broken by his time with the Jackal, or maybe he is just disappeared. It's got to finish in Cadiz next week, I think. It's got to finish at the mansion, at the beautiful infinity pool overlooking the stunning bay. Surely that's the showdown. Yeah,
and she might be on her own, right? Because the basically pulled the plug on her operation.
That's right.
That's another convenient plotting thing.
Yeah, and OC's gone. He's not giving any information. He's just hitting that punching bag and working out his frustrations. The boss, she's dealing with her boring as fuck plants in her office.
Yes.
She's not interested in continuing the mission. So you're right, Bianca is on her own.
So he did find out that OC was getting those text messages from the US. And now, of course, like you mentioned, he's got his knuckles wrapped there and he's like, I don't want to get involved either, worried about my career. But it just seems like such a weird time to be taking their eyes off the ball. Like, this thing's supposed to be going live in hours. And they're like, this is the moment that they're like, well, we're not caring about this operation anymore. And Bianca makes that point, right? Going like, what if this happens? Like, you don't want to get further involved in this, but what if it does turn out to be someone who was trained by the UK military? Like, this is going to look really bad. And you just take your foot off the accelerator now. It seems really bad. And this is probably because they're getting pressured externally, right? We actually see that Charles Dance meets with their, what's this guy called?
Is he the defense secretary or I'm not quite sure what he is, but he's high up in the British government.
Yeah, he's the guy who allowed her to see the redacted file, right? So it's like, this guy's, obviously highly involved with the intelligence agencies. And he's meeting with the Charles Dance character and they're talking about the assassination. Like, this is, obviously very shady.
Charles Dance, again, another actor who gets one scene per episode and absolutely kills it.
He kills it every time. Exactly. Yes. He's much more memorable than that other woman has been.
He said something amazing and then he said, who said that? Maybe it was me.
I think it was me. What was the thing he was taking credit for? I forget what it was too. Let's see if I can track it down. I'll insert
something very profound that sounded like some famous quote.
It sounded kind of profound. What else we have here? Oh, of course. Then we get probably towards the middle third of the episode. The Jackal has returned home. This guy's like, how much miles does this guy have? I would just look at this guy's travel itinerary and this guy's suspect number one. Just look at his flight itineraries, like day to day, not even week to week. But he's back home. He doesn't know where his wife is and talks to his baby.
He's the Jackal. He walks straight past her to go to talk to his child.
Very observant. Yeah. Honestly, the first time I saw this, it may be because I was being generous in my read of it. I'm like, he knows she's eavesdropping, and this is him. This performance of the 3 of us are going to get on a plane and disappear together, and I'm so tired now. You're going to have to fly. This scene, as you can probably tell from my tone, was a little corny for me. But in rewatching it, I don't think that he was performing for her because he seems really upset. Like when he's tucking his son in, you feel like a real emotional pang there. So I think that this was sincere, the softer side of the Jackal.
Interesting. You could take it both ways, couldn't you? You could take it like another play that he's doing. He knows that the baby monitor is in there. He saw Nuria as he walked past.
Right. That's how
into
I read
the
it
house.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a sweet scene anyway, so I quite enjoyed watching it, and the way that you could take it both ways. It's I guess it tells you who you are, which way you're going to play it, or or your closeness with the character, or your closeness with the actor Eddie Redmayne doing this. I quite liked the way that it could be taken multiple ways.
Did you read it a particular way?
I read it both ways. So I thought it was a sweet scene. If you could think of it as a sweet scene, he's an absent father. He doesn't know how to interact with his child. He's never with his child.
Right.
So to have a moment of silence with him, it is very sweet. But yeah, I like the way that I think it's all just a play for his wife. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that once again, I think you could read it both ways. And the first time around, I'm like, this is definitely a performance. And like you said, he knew she was there, or even if he somehow missed her, which like you said, this Jackal should be much more observant. He's slipping a lot, to be honest. Not sure how he lasted this long at this job, but he may have seen her or minimally just assumed if she's not here in the room with him, she can hear this through the monitor. I mean, that's our lives when when they had kids that age, right? You're always constantly monitoring. You're having a glass of wine outside and you're definitely watching the monitor the whole entire time. So she's probably somewhere nearby listening in. So it is a performance for her. And then there is that like emotional moment at the end, which made me feel like, well, maybe he's not performing because then who would that be for? She can't see his face or anything. You're right. Maybe it's that it is a performance, but then he is feeling something there at the same time. So it's sincere at the same time that it's a performance.
Yeah.
And then she asks him to say out loud exactly what he does. And he says, I kill people for money 78 times, something like that. I didn't keep an accurate count, but it felt like that. And, he finally flips his lid there at the end, and she is actually scared by his reaction. And I guess I buy this because she has never seen this part of him. But now that she knows this, I mean, I'm not sure why she's so surprised that he could be this violent. I mean, she should have. I just wonder if she is playing her cards right. If she is surprised by his behavior and she really does think that this guy, or knows now that this guy is an assassin, she has to think that her and her family are at risk. How do you think she's obviously upset. She's outraged by this. She's like, is any of this real? Is this real? She points at a ring. Are we real? Is any of this real? Are you real? Which is probably a question that he's asking himself. I mean, like, at a fundamental level, he probably does not know himself.
As you know, I like Nuria. I like her throughout the series. I did enjoy seeing her sitting by the piano, waiting for him to come down the stairs and do her finger point thing and all that, and force him. And it was a good line when she said, when he finally went off at her, she said, "Okay, now we can have a conversation."
Right.
Which I did enjoy that. Finally, the truth is out between them, and they can behave like real people towards each other, which I think is very important in a marriage when you reach those key moments between you and your partner.
This is the most extreme possible example of that. But I mean, I don't understand how she is still in that house. Like, I mean, maybe we need to know. I just don't feel like I know these characters well enough for some of this, just for the fact that she knows where his money is. I don't know exactly how much it is, but when he said, is it $40,000? The brother was like, it's way more than $40,000. So it's whatever, hundreds of thousands of dollars. This could probably set her up pretty well. This is an absentee father, like you said. And honestly, if this woman was to disappear with his kid, is he really going to be like, I'm going to go run after this woman and murder her? Or is he going to say, like, that's actually one less headache for me? That's maybe fair. I'm being too cynical in my read, but
it might be a good thing for him as well.
I know. And maybe for her too. That's what I'm trying to say. So
for everyone, especially for the
everybody involved. Yeah, exactly. I can't not think about that. And the fact that she's in the house by herself with no witnesses, willing to be there and letting this conversation escalate. I personally, watching this as a television show, do not think she's in danger in that moment. But if I was her, do I think I might be in danger in that moment? Yes,
Mm.
I definitely would be thinking about that with my kid in the house, you know? So
I guess we needed to see more of their like burgeoning relationship before they had the child, before they were married. We need to see more of that to really understand how they actually feel for each other.
and this could be my Eddie Redmayne in general. I don't vibe with him as an actor. I do
Mm.
like him as the assassin role for sure, but parts of this don't work so well for me. And like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of him in general, although I think he's done a pretty good job. But I don't think it's just his performance. I think we have to believe that they are madly in love with each other so that she can trust him this way. And I don't feel that. I don't see that. And
Mm.
whenever he's around, he's there for a day and then he runs off. And then, most of the time we've been with her, it's her finding out that everything she thought about him was a lie. It seems difficult that she'd
Mm.
still be
Yeah.
in this situation at this moment, especially when there's a
Yeah.
drawer full of cash available to her right close by.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not. He's an interesting cat as an actor.
Speaking of those scenes a lot of this domestic stuff isn't working for me, then of course we see Bianca hook up with her husband again.
Mm.
This is the best version of this scene. I just don't know if I
Mm.
really want to see it, but it does. Obviously, the show very much is putting over and over again, putting those domestic scenes right next to each other. So we're saying like Bianca and the Jackal are dealing with the same type of thing. She's invested in this mission. He's invested in the mission. It's hard for me to draw that parallel so tightly considering, she's trying to prevent assassination. He's trying to commit assassination. This is a yin and yang situation.
Mm. It was a good scene, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's insane that he's staying at the house of his ex-wife. I think that's
Yeah, she's supposed to be
bizarre.
okay with this. He has no other options. Like, what is going on?
Terrible decision. I did like it though. It was like an indoor-outdoor type scene. They were inside, but the outside was looking in, and then it cut to the next morning with Nuria and the Jackal, and they were also in a kind of indoor-outdoor scenario. And I thought it played quite well. All the actors were working well in those two scenes, and the way that it kind of mirrored each other, I was down with.
And once again, this is kind of what I felt about the scene with Bianca and her daughter last week, where you didn't really like that scene. And I'm like, I would rather spend less time with the home domestic situation. But given the fact that we were going to have a scene like this, I thought it worked pretty well. And once again, I think what he's asking her and telling her that, it's not just now. This has been our whole relationship. I don't feel like they have invested enough in the domestic relationship between Nuria and the Jackal, whatever we're calling him now. What does she call him? She calls him
Charles.
That's right, Charles. I forgot his birth name now.
Alexander.
Alexander
Duggan.
I knew it was Alexander Duggan, right?
So, how many names does he have?
There's a lot of names. Yeah. And then he has all those passports he's looking at this week. He's like, which one of these? Which, by the way, I find it funny that he's looking at all his passports, but he's not doing any prosthetics. It's like, isn't he still like isn't his picture still everywhere, all over the media, or did everybody just kind of move on?
Oh, maybe they'll fit that in. Another prosthetics. They'll fit it in. This is the last episode.
I mean, just to bring up current events, we literally had an assassination of the CEO of one of the biggest health insurance companies this week in the US. And this guy, we saw his whole face and he's still on the lam. So maybe you don't have to be that clever to get away with these things. Who knows?
Yeah, I have been following that just tangentially, but yeah, there's some cool CCTV footage of this guy roundabouts, and it's quite a brazen crime, isn't it?
It's crazy. It really feels like something out of a TV show. And at first I'm like, this guy's just like imitating a TV character and he's going to get caught in a day. But apparently he did cover his tracks pretty well. It's pretty nuts. But yeah, it really is like something out of a spy film.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it? Oh, we'll see where that story goes.
Yeah, that's a whole other digression. You mentioned then that it's the next morning. We see Nuria, they're back in Cadiz. And of course, her brother shows up like, I got another great business plan for us. The last thing didn't work out, but now I'm getting the business with a gangster.
When you're talking about, cramming things in, twists and turns in the episode, I will give it to them. It's very efficient the way they brought the brother in.
Yeah.
And the way that they've brought Nuria to turn the Jackal, to flip the script so that he wants to do something for her in just a couple of scenes. Very efficient writing.
I have a question for you. I have a question there, though. When I watched that scene, my initial reaction was, okay, so now he goes and assassinates this guy. On the one hand, it is a way to get rid of this guy, obviously. It is a way to tell Nuria, you had this problem, I took care of it for you. And it's also a way to tell the brother, like, be careful, or this is you next time, right? So
Perfect.
it serves all of those purposes. But I still bumped against this for the fact that we didn't get like a reaction from Nuria afterwards, because immediately he's just like, I'm on a boat to Estonia again. See you later. We don't even see the reaction to it, because I wonder if she would be like, wow, this guy's cold blooded. If anything, raise more alarms, especially with her brother involved, and that maybe the brother will talk at this moment and run off and be like, oh my God, I have to get some kind of protection. I'm going to talk to the police immediately. It just seems very cocky that he thinks that he's safe with this. Oh, and the last thing I'd say, before, I definitely want to get your feedback on that, but the last thing I'd say too is just such a public assassination. He couldn't just knife this guy in an alleyway or something. Like, it seemed way too public. Like, what was he thinking?
I did not think he was going to do that. Yeah, I thought he was going to meet with the guy or yeah, like you say, take him out a little bit more quietly than to prove a point with such a public display.
Yeah. And there's hundreds of witnesses. It's insane. This guy, the boat, there was only one boat. It was like, I couldn't even see the boat. It was like a speck in the distance. He must have sniped him from over a mile away. Who could that be? It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, he's got his old gun. It was the gun from the first episode, I think.
Right.
And
Yes.
with a new type of stabilizer and a targeting system. So it's good that his tech evolves nice and quickly, and now he can shoot from a rocking boat. So he's brilliant, isn't he?
He orders like a steady cam. I have so many things to say about this part, and I'm going to save it to the end because it's a lot. But he orders basically a steady cam rig. You see, like a camera, you actually see a camera attached to it. And this is how they shoot a lot of movies, right? Like, in the old days, you had to just have a really steady hand to be able to follow actors around. Now you use this steady cam rig, you strap it to your body. It's exactly like what we see here. But of course, it has like all these shock absorbers and gyroscopes. And so that when you move, it like smooths any kind of movement. So the camera doesn't keep shaking like we used to see in older movies. A lot of things are shot all steady cam now, and they look like they're all shot on tripods. But it's just the fact that he orders that and then comes up with this contraption with this gimbal attached to it. Maybe he does spend a day training himself on it, but it just seems like, he just tries, he's just like, I'm going to try this out tomorrow. And hey, it all worked out perfectly. Kind of cool. The idea of it is actually very cool. But of course, it's weird that he, once again, does this assassination of this low-level crime lord and then is going to use the same equipment and do the same thing the next day in a very public way. It's pretty obvious that he's pointing a finger at himself. Unless
absurd,
it's intentional.
Yes. Unless it's intentional. Okay. I just said it's absurd. I mean, it's a spy thriller TV series.
Yes.
Let's go out there occasionally, right? And it was very it's still when the bullet hit the guy in the restaurant, I was surprised. I knew it was probably coming, but I was surprised. So it was great. And so was the brother. He was very surprised too.
Obviously, the reason he does the assassination in Cadiz is just so that there is this clue left behind for Bianca. Because once again, for all the reasons I said before, he could have just shot him because, he's a gangster and he has enemies. He could have just like walked up to him, as he was exiting and just shot him and kept walking and like dumped the overcoat in an alleyway or something. Right. Or had, the brother set up a meeting between the two of them. And when he walks in, he has a polite conversation, just shoots the guy in cold blood and then turns to the brother and goes, and that's a message to you, my friend, as well. Right. But then, of course, that would not serve the purpose of leaving this giant clue. And it just seems like so messy. That's on me. But I really butted against that a lot.
I mean, I feel like they've just left Bianca out there. She's not doing anything. And this is one easy way to pull her straight back in.
The story needed it, but it was, I had my issues with it. Yeah. And then he gets back to Estonia, as you mentioned. Bianca's really on her own. She really feels it. Her husband kind of is telling her, this is going to work out. I don't think if you're going to commit to this, you can't just do it once. You got to do it every single day, which I thought was a really good scene. Once again, I thought that was really well done. I mean, really what you have to do in any relationship or any friendship or anything, actually. But of course, she has a Google News alert. Anybody who gets sniped from a great distance, please send that notification immediately. She's headed for Cadiz, obviously, at this moment. But that's not where he is currently. Of course, he is off the coast of this island. And this poor guy who's just like, just pay me, this gruff guy. He's just like, whatever. I don't care what you're fishing for, whatever. And he's just like, okay, good. Well, I'm going to slit your throat. No blood,
Bogdan,
though.
I think his name was. Yeah, just the local charter operator.
That's what he gets.
We did get another nice close up on the Jackal as he's slitting his throat. So he's obviously morally, corrupted. Well, he doesn't like to do these things, but he has to get to the mission.
To get that $100 million, it's just, what else can you do? I have to feed my kids somehow. Surprised by the lack of blood, which would be, definitely attract a lot of attention. I mean, he probably does know how to kill without relieving that much of a bloodbath, but it is surprisingly. I like that he just leaves him propped up. So if anyone comes by, he quickly pulls out the fishing line.
That's very stable, right? So the boat's stable. He's not going to fall off the seat.
He had him sitting on a steady cam the whole time, just keeping it propped up.
Oh yeah, nice bit of fishing as well.
I love that. I actually did laugh a couple of times, probably unintentionally, at this sequence. There was suspense going on, but all that, that there's a boat comes close by and he pulls out the fish line real quick, and all of that made me laugh, actually.
There was a strange boat that went past quite close.
Yes.
While he's holding this
right
sniper
the
weapon.
second before he
Whose
pulls the trigger.
that?
Someone just happened.
Wake that goes through. I've got no idea who that was.
Actually, that was part of what made me laugh. Was it's on top of that, just whatever these kids. They should have had a drunk party boat go by. That would have been extra funny.
Yeah.
They actually identify him, right? This drone sees him. He's able to use some kind of device to knock it out of the sky, but not before they actually see that he has a sniper rifle on him. I love when he just throws a jacket on the sniper rifle. No one's going to see this. Not suspicious at all. But
yeah,
of course,
finally they see the sniper. It's a sniper on the boat. Finally.
Yeah. And all of this is really bad security, by the way, because it seems like they have identified the suspicious boat and that there's probably something there. They send the drone out. He obviously hasn't actually physically shot the jet skier yet, the one security guard, but they're still going forward with this, with his swimming routine, which I thought was, terrible decision. He's 5 hours away from going live. He can't wait 5 hours. And his boyfriend, by the way, gives him terrible advice. He goes, don't break your routine now. It's absolutely break your routine now. Someone is trying to murder you. And they probably will not murder you after River goes live. So just sit in bed for the next 5 hours, for God's sakes. This would be my wife, by the way, though. My wife is constantly in motion. If it was just if you go outside, someone's going to shoot you. She's like, I can't stay here. I got to go weed the garden. It's terrible idea. Terrible idea. Yeah. And then, of course, like you mentioned, he gets his guy. This is the, I'm going to sound negative again. Maybe I am intentionally being negative here. It's thrilling. The sequence is definitely thrilling, is really well made. But this is the most impossible of impossible shots of all times. This is a 1 in 1 billion shots. Maybe you have a more general, I should say, generous read on it. What'd you think?
No, it's silly. And it didn't have to be silly because they set it all up really well.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
It was all working. He timed the amount of time that UDC could hold his breath under the water, which I thought was great. But just the fact that UDC could swim underwater, and from his angle, you're not going to be able to see where the guy's
where
swimming.
He's going to come up. Exactly.
There's no way.
Right.
So as thrilling as this scene was, and on the edge of my seat that I was like, this can't work. It can't happen. He can't fire the shot before the guy's surfaced, not knowing which direction he's swimming.
Right.
And it just made it a bit silly. Unfortunately, I love these kills. I love the way he lines them up and he plans them, but it just, What did you think?
I tend to nitpick, I know, but as soon as they're on the boat, and immediately I'm like, this is an impossible shot because he's so far away. The waves are not in sync with each other, right? So he has to know the wave pattern. He has to know, and everything else. Let's say he's just really, really lucky and all those things. He just picks a spot and says, he's going to come up right here. For example, like you said, exactly where he was before. He's going to pop up in the same spot and he's just waiting and waiting and waiting. And then he gets lucky enough to say, well, I hit the other guy. If I'm going to shoot in the exact same location, when he pops up, bad luck for him. He catches him, right? Or he doesn't even, he nicks him in the neck or something and then he bleeds out. So it's not a perfect shot, but he still does the trick. Some kind of variability there. But to make this thing so perfect where, like you said, he could have popped up anywhere and arbitrarily in the ocean. And he knew exactly where he was going to pop up. And of course, the craziest thing about it is, even if you said, oh no, but he saw him getting close to the surface, he has to pull the trigger 8 seconds before he surfaces. So he couldn't possibly see anything. He could have picked where he was swimming at that second. And if the guy took 1 inch to the left, he would have missed him. It's the most insane thing. And like you said, it didn't have to be this way. when
It's a
I
shame.
actually thought was going to happen, when he calibrated on that stone, the shot, that first one, I was thinking like his boyfriend or whatever is going to be trying to like pull him out of the water in a hurry, and he's going to hit the same mark again. And just as he pulls him out, he's like, I got you. He gets shot in the back or something. I thought that's what was going to happen. The fact that he could miraculously hit this guy, a moving target in the water a mile and a half away, like there's wind variability. There's, I don't want to get too much into it, but it's like, it's like the physics of this are literally impossible. But, and then, like you said, it didn't have to be this silly. They could have grounded it in some way. Like, he has to go up he has to go up that mountain pass, right? And he could have just waited for him. You shoot, he has to come out of the water, and then you wait for your shot. And then the jet skis could be getting closer and closer. And he's like, he's got to wait. And then he makes the shot and jumps and takes off, right? They could have made this more plausible. It's so silly. And by the way, in the security, there's a terrible job. The guy in the jet ski, not the jet ski that approaches the boat, the other guy who tells him to get out of the water, just, where the boat is, just put the jet ski between you and the boat. Like it's all of it is.
Exactly. I don't know where that jet ski. Did that jet ski just chase straight after him? I'm not sure where that went.
He's just like, I'm out of here. Hey, you got to get out of the water, and then I'm out. It was nuts. It was totally nuts.
I did think it was funny when the head security guard just jumped you off the jetty with his shoes on, just like, oh God. Everyone's failed me. I've got to do this myself and recover the body.
Yeah, what a disaster. Yeah, and then for some reason I had read, maybe it was just one of the recaps I was reading, that they said that like we have to see if he's dead. And then I actually rewatched the last minute of the show because I'm like, I'm pretty certain he's dead. There's no chance that he got like shot and he's just bleeding and he can be rescued. I think that he's dead.
Yeah, that's how I read it too. No, he's gone.
Yes. I mean, he's just like lying there lifeless in the... And now he makes his escape, and
he's escaped.
Hot pursuit. Yeah, hot pursuit.
Yeah, cool. That's a cool ending. It was a cool shot to end on.
Yeah, that's very James Bond there. That whole last sequence there with the motorboats, hot in pursuit, or maybe Miami Vice also, or some combination of both. But yeah, very cool. And yeah, of course, it leaves us all on the edge of our seats wondering, like, well, how the hell is he going to get out of this one? Like, they're right behind them, and you have to assume that even if it's just two boats now, they're going to be radioing every police organization, any military organization, every intelligence agency in the area. So even if he's got the faster boat, which, I mean, he just got any random boat out of the dock. I don't think this is the fastest boat available. There's going to be helicopters tracking him. I have no idea how he's going to get out of the situation. I assume he's going to go underwater somewhere, like he's planned for this. But if they are actually just going to have him somehow outmaneuver them in the open ocean where anybody can see him, and he just pulls the dock and escapes and like, ooh, we lost them, I'm going to be really, really disappointed. You have any theories on how he might make this escape?
No, I'm just going to let it play out. Let's. I didn't even think he could go underwater, but that's a good one. Little mini submarine or something.
I have to,
but he has got
at least a scuba gear or something, right? Like it's because
I trust it. He got the fastest boat, the most stable boat. That's the one.
It's definitely the most stable one, right? All right. So we'll touch base again next week, and we'll know everything by then.
I was thinking, watching Black Doves, and I just binged it. Maybe it would have been better going week to week. Doing the Jackal like this, where we saw the first 5 episodes very quickly, at least that's how it was released, and then going week to week. It's been pretty good. I've enjoyed the ride.
Yeah, I think that they could have gone even slower on this. I agree. They could have gone maybe not week to week. I liked having that binge at the beginning. It definitely hooked me in for sure. Honestly, given the quality of this particular episode, I think I'd be more forgiving if they given me episode 9 and 10 together. So but we'll see how it all goes. In general, though, I have enjoyed this. It's been bumpy though. Some aspects of the story I've liked a lot more than others, but in general, I really liked it. But nothing, I have to say that it has, like when I see the amount of care of detail of this assassination versus the first episode and that very first assassination, which I thought was brilliant. The setup of it, and then the actual execution of it and his escape and all of that was just so beautifully thought out. This is not up to par. But
it's not. No. And considering it's the Jackal's final assassination before he retires, you'd think he would have done it a bit better. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Oh, I just suddenly thought maybe, just possibly, that this is quite a reach, but is he going to set up his brother-in-law as the Jackal? No, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. I was wondering if he was intentionally leaving that clue.
Maybe he's hooked his brother-in-law as part of the escape.
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, there could be someone out there in a boat that he's meeting up with at some point. Yeah, for sure.
Maybe Gary's there.
Oh, but that would be really cool, right? If that would be a way to tie this all together, that's for sure. Because we definitely want to know what happened to Gary.
Yeah. He's been helping him this whole time.
Yeah, exactly. He's facilitating all of this.
Oh, fun.
All right. Any one more thing to ask you before I let you go is, do you think River goes live anyway?
No, I don't. I think Rivers, what is it, the MacGuffin? It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's just the bit that forces the plot forward, that gives it all impetus. I don't think it goes live, and I don't think anything will come of it.
I think you're probably right, but I almost wish that it does go live, and then all of this was for naught, and then all these people still end up like completely screwed, and that would be kind of like an ironic twist at the end.
And that would be good for a second season, right?
For a second season, right? Because they could be after him, and he could be on the run. Yeah, it could be other thing. And then it'd be everyone's after him, right? In that scenario.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Victor.
No problem.